our last week of our sermon series entitled Playlist. We've been looking at the book of Psalms. Has this been encouraging, challenging to anyone? I hope it's spoken to you as we've been able to, again, just get a little bit more of a experiential look at God. Yes, certainly learning more things about Him, educating ourselves on who He is, but also digging in and diving into the Psalms, experiencing Him, attempting to experience Him on a deeper level. And that's what I love about the Psalms. It connects on so many different emotions. Now, I was going back and forth this week, what Psalm to finish up on. And we did a similar series 3 years ago where we went through some Psalms and we unpacked it. And there have been some of you over the last couple of weeks who have asked me, hey, are you going to do Psalm 23? Are you going to do Psalm 23? And I did that Psalm 3 years ago, and I felt like, I'm not going to do Psalm 23. It's kind of going to be like a little bit of regurgitation of a sermon, and I didn't know if that was like too fresh. I was asking Colleen about it, like, hey, should I do Psalm 23? Nah, don't do Psalm 23, but everybody's asking for Psalm 23 because it's, the most popular psalm, if not the most popular passage in the entire Bible, so we're going to do Psalm 23. I'm going to try to do a little bit of a new twist on it, a new spin. If you know it, say it with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The title of today's sermon is A Table for Two. Table for two. Turn to your neighbor, say, let's get ready to eat. Go ahead and take a seat. Psalm 23, it's certainly a very popular song, a very sentimental song. It's my favorite psalm. It's a psalm that I've clinged through in seasons of transition, a psalm that I've clung to in seasons of discouragement and uncertainty, a psalm that I've used at funerals, and the more I meditate on this psalm and I try to experience what David was experiencing in writing this psalm, the more I'm coming to realize that this psalm is much more about life than it is about death. Now, yes, we do have that famous verse, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. We tend to emphasize that verse, and we tend to pull that verse out at funerals or deep, dark seasons of depression, discouragement, dysfunction, but it's much more a song about life. David ends the song by saying, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I tried to think, like what was the context in which David wrote this song? Because there's not a whole lot of information in that regard. Theologians and scholars kind of argue and suggest, when David perhaps may have written this, but there is no definitive answer. And as I kind of meditate on it more and I look over the course of David's life, I almost think that this was a song that he wrote in an older age than when he was this young buck, caring for his sheep out in the pastures. Because if you remember David, and as we've talked about David over the last several weeks, David is this guy who experienced the highest of highs. He became king. He defeated a giant. He went after 200 Philistines for a girl. He had his mighty men of 300 that took out thousands in battle. To experience the highs that David experienced, you and I will probably never come close to. But then on the flip side, he's also experienced some of the lowest of lows. He gets caught up with this sin with Bathsheba. He impregnates another man's wife, and when he's trying to cover his sin, he actually sends the husband of that wife out to battle to have him killed, and this wife becomes pregnant, and Nathan the prophet comes and calls him out for his sin, and one of the consequences of his sin is that baby dies in birth. Some of you, I imagine, have experienced that. I mean, that's a low point in life. And then as you look at the rest of David's life, yes, there are these highs, but then there is just family dysfunction all around. I mean, not to mention just being king, there's enemies coming at you constantly, wanting to dethrone you. But then there are this dysfunction within the family. Your own son is wanting to kill you so he can take your throne. There's even a situation in David's family in which one of his sons rapes his half-sister. And so when you think about some of the things that David experienced, I mean, he goes from the mountaintops, enjoying God's presence, to the deepest valleys where he is just embracing and hanging on for dear life. And so I almost think that as he's kind of experienced a little bit of life, he's looking back and he's thinking about how God has been present with him through it all, through the highs and the lows. And just naturally it comes out, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores, or he heals my soul. So this is a song of experience. Someone who's lived a life that has been awesome at times, but then a life that has been awful at others. And so he's given us an insight of just God's presence and how he is consistently there. And I think what David is communicating in all of this, as he's reflecting on God and how he is this shepherd type of a God who leads and guides and makes him lie down in green pastures, and how he thinks of this God who is this host who's preparing a table for him in the presence of his enemies, that his cup is overflowing, that he's coming to the realization, the truth, the promise that there is infinite provision and there is infinite protection in the intimate presence of God. Infinite provision. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, I shall not be in need. And there is infinite protection. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. That there is infinite provision and infinite protection in the intimate presence of God. And if we would just grab onto that today and take that with us wherever we go. There are these two general perspectives that David brings, that God is this shepherd and that God is this host. Some people think that this passage is really only referring to God as a shepherd. Even the idea of God preparing a table, we have this idea, this imagery that we are hosting people or that God is hosting us. But some believe that he's still maintaining that shepherd theme, because as you were out and about the mountains of Israel, you would come across these flat plateaus that were often referred to as tables. And then there are others who think there are actually three different images of God. You have God as shepherd, you have God as like this tour guide that he leads you along paths of righteousness for his name's sake, and then you have God as the host who prepares the table. I'm going to look at it really through the eyes of God as a shepherd and a host. That's kind of where I land on this whole thing. Because when you have the idea of he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies, that he anoints my head with oil and my cup overflows, there is very much this idea that we get. Because when you think about it, there may be some here in this room, we have different perspectives, we have different thoughts on God, we have different thoughts on religion, we have different ideas and thoughts on Jesus, but when it comes to a meal, when it comes to a table, like we know what that's about. Like we know that there is intentionality there. There is intimacy there. There is relationship within that context. And so David is fleshing this out. He's writing this song, and he looks at God as a shepherd who provides, that he makes him lie down in green pastures, that he will replenish us, that he leads us beside still waters. He refreshes our souls, and he'll even restore us. He'll heal us when we're broken and busted, and he leads us in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Like that God's reputation is on the line as he leads us as a shepherd. That he's consistently providing for us. I shall not want, I shall not be in need. And these aren't just one-time events. That God as a shepherd, he is leading us to green pastures, plural, and he is leading us beside still waters, plural, and he is guiding us along paths, plural, of righteousness. That this is an ongoing, perpetual leading that he does for us as a shepherd. That even as a shepherd, he is a shepherd who not only provides, but who protects us, that he protects his sheep, that even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, another translation is, as I walk through a valley of deep darkness. So it's not just death, it's depression, it's discouragement, it's dysfunction, it's deep darkness. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? Well, because you are with me. You're present with me. And if that wasn't enough, if his mere presence isn't enough, then you have your rod and your staff. They comfort me. Now, what is that referring to? Well, as a shepherd would have both a rod and a staff. A staff would be really what he would use to kind of guide the sheep and bring them down paths. And if a sheep fell into a thicket or down a little ledge, he would use that staff with the hook on the end to pull that sheep up. It was a comforting presence. But then if anything ever came after the sheep, to attack the sheep, like some sort of wild animal, then you would have this rod to go and defend your sheep, beat that wild animal. This is the image that we get when David goes before King Saul. And if you remember the story, he goes before King Saul when Israel's before the Philistine army, and Goliath is out there taunting the armies of God, the armies of Israel, and King David goes to King Saul and says, I'll take him out. I'll handle this uncircumcised Philistine. And King Saul looks at him and is like, how are you going to handle this 9'9" giant? And David goes on to say this in 1 Samuel chapter 17. He says, your servant used to keep sheep for his father. So I used to be a shepherd, David is saying. And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and I struck him and I delivered him out of the mouth. And if that lion or if that bear chose to rise up against me, I caught him by the beard. I caught that lion by the mane and I struck him with my rod. I mean, that's boss. That's next level. Now we like to think of Jesus as like this meek, mild, nice hair parted down the middle, nice clean-cut beard, white robe and sandals. But when the enemies come after us, David is reflecting, okay, I know you're with me. But even if that's not enough, I know that your staff is there to guide me and comfort me, and I know you're ready to bust in the teeth of the wicked, as he says in another psalm. And so your presence and your power, that you provide infinite protection. And then he switches the imagery to God as a host who provides and a host who protects. And I used this imagery last time when I preached this sermon on Psalm 23, but I did it a little differently. If you were here 3 years ago, we had a table up here, and I invited some people up from out in the congregation to kind of sit around this table, and I kind of communicated this idea that here I am in the presence of my enemies who are sitting at the table as I'm keeping my focus and my attention on God. that he is my source of provision, he is my source of protection. But then as I thought about this more, and as I actually kind of researched and I saw other pastors kind of preach this same idea, I realized it's a little bit different than that. That there is a table that is reserved just for you with God. That there is this intimate relationship that occurs when we come up and we sit at this table. That there's infinite provision for us. There's infinite protection. When we're in this intimate relationship with God. Like this communicates something to us that most of us can understand, that most of us can relate to. And as I thought about, okay, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Like for today, you all are my enemies. Like I don't really think I'm your enemy. I hope I'm not your enemy. I mean, I was hanging out with you yesterday, so I don't think we were enemies. But for today, you're my enemies. And I'm sitting here with God, my shepherd, my host, having this intimate relationship with him in the presence of my enemies. Table for two. Him and I. Reflecting back on life, reflecting on how he's provided for me, reflecting on how he has protected me. And that he is wanting to continue to do this all the days of my life until one day I dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I got thinking about this table idea and like how sometimes we don't eat. We don't take in all of who God is. And there's times when, man, we just got to pour ourselves a glass of water. Jesus, would you like some? Of course, I'm going to serve you. And he gives us all of our choice foods, and he gives us everything that we need. And just enjoying his presence in this intimate relationship with him. A couple years ago, Colleen and I, we went out to dinner for Valentine's Day. And this was actually the last time we went out for dinner on Valentine's Day, just because of how crazy it was to go out to dinner on Valentine's Day. We went to our favorite restaurant here in town, and they packed us in like sardines. Like we had this little intimate table for two, but I kid you not, like the next table was like right here. And then the other table was like right here. And I mean, they were all about like just rolling in those couples that night and turning those tables, making a profit. And we're sitting here trying to have an intimate conversation. And I'm like eavesdropping on this conversation because we're just so close. And I'm sure they're probably eavesdropping on our conversation. And so we're having to kind of watch what we're talking about. You know, it's Valentine's Day. And as I started thinking about that, I started realizing like, okay, it is so easy for people to sneak up to our table. To even pull up a seat to our table. There's been times when we've been out to eat and someone recognizes us and we may not know them, but I kind of have learned that look where someone sees me and they like kind of do a double take and like, is that who it is? And then all of a sudden they start walking our direction. And they, you know, sometimes it's usually just like a hi, how are you? You know, I know you're a pastor. I've sat, you know, when you were a worship leader, and now I've been at your church a few times, and usually it's pretty quick, but then sometimes it's like they just keep going and talking. The servers bring the food out to the table, and it's like awkward. You don't know if, okay, am I allowed to start eating, or God, like, am I supposed to like give this person time, or is there a way I can kind of say like, hey, I'm in the middle of this intimate moment with my wife, and like our food just got delivered, and it's getting cold. Like, what am I supposed to do here? And I've realized how easy it is for people to pull up a seat to your table. and how easy it is for our enemies, particularly the evil one, the devil, how he can pull up a seat to the table. Hey, how you doing? Man, how's life? Mine? How's your relationship? Yeah, I don't know how you do it. She's crazy. All the time. I don't know how you do it. Yeah, how's work going? Don't worry about those numbers. That's why God gave you an eraser. Just, fudge that a little bit. Yeah, you mind? This looks really good, by the way. And just how easy it is for us to give up a seat at the table that God has prepared for us. So I'm thinking about David. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. How do we know when we've given up a seat at the table? When we've allowed the devil to pull up a chair, if you will. And I think it's because we begin to believe a couple of different types of lies. And these are going to be some boundaries for us to know if we've allowed the devil to come up and grab a seat at our table. That if you begin to believe or you begin to hear that another table is better than this table, the devil has pulled up to your table. Like, yeah, that one over there, that's a good one. You want to be at that table. That's a fun table. That's full of life over there. That one's got excitement and adventure. You want to go sit at that table. Don't worry about that wife. This wife, she'll meet all of your needs over here. You go sit at that table, and before you know it, we're sitting here at the table, and we're beginning to believe the lie that another table is better than this table. And how do we know that is a lie? Because when we jump to John 10:10, this is a good passage for you to write next to Psalm 23 in your Bible. This is really a parallel passage of Jesus himself describing himself as a good shepherd. And he says to his disciples, the thief comes only to steal, to kill, and to destroy, but I've come to give you life and life more abundantly. And so we know that any other table is dangerous. Any other table is far from even being close to how awesome this table is, because Jesus says the only purpose that the devil has is to steal you, to kill you, and to destroy you. But I've come that you might have life, and life more abundant. You know that you've given up a seat at the table when you begin to believe that lie, that somehow another table is better. Or if you've heard that you're not worthy for this table. That God, I'm not good enough to sit at this table. I'm not good enough to dine in this intimate relationship with you. Well, you just go on to the very next verse there in John 10:10. Actually, in John 10:11, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. That's you. So that when God was calling ahead to put this table for two together, the cost of this reservation was everything. And so we must not believe the lie that we're not worthy of this table, that we're not good enough. In our own selves, you're exactly right. We are not good enough for this table. Our sin separates us from God, but he is the good shepherd who gives his life for the sheep so that we might come and dine and enjoy God at this table, that we may have life and life more abundantly, that you are made in the image of God. That you may think you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not strong enough, you're not this, you're not that. No. You are made in the image of God. And that this table is for you and he. The third lie that we might sometimes cling to is that if you've heard that you're not going to make it, then the devil has pulled up a seat to your table. And we say things like this all the time. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this one. I'm not sure if I've got enough strength to make it through this trial. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to pull myself through. I don't know if I am going to make it. And where we can cling to the promise is when David says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. That when he's talking about this valley of deep darkness, this isn't a permanent location, that God is just bringing us through it. That it is like a shadow, that yes, it may be dark for a little bit, but it is going to quickly give way to God's sunlight, that even though I walk through the valley, this valley is not going to consume me, this valley is not going to destroy me, that if you begin to believe that I am not going to make it, you have given the devil a seat at your table. And then one more. That if you've heard that everyone is against you, you've given the devil a seat at your table. Now, it may seem like, yes, I am surrounded by enemies. God, you have prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies, but not everybody's against you. There may be some who are against you. That boss that has it out for you, that manager that's trying to crush you, trying to get you transferred, trying to move you. You may feel like that diagnosis is out to get you. It's going to destroy you. It's going to crush you. And it might not be you personally, but it might affect someone else in your family, and it's going to wreak havoc amongst your family. Everybody is against me. I'm starting off a new school year. I don't know my new classmates. I already feel isolated and alone. Everybody's against me. That I'm on some sports team. I'm on some whatever. That nobody seems to be supportive. Everybody's kind of doing their thing. I'm the outsider looking in, trying to break in. Everybody's against me. And we start to put our defenses up. We start to put our walls up, and we start to close ourselves off from other people. And we forget about the promise, if God is for us, who can be against us? For he did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. How will he not also with him graciously give us all things? If you believe everybody is against you, the devil has a seat at your table. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I don't ever want to communicate or lead you to believe that because you've placed your faith and trust in Jesus, that life is going to be easy. There's going to be difficulties. Jesus says it, that in this world you will find tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. There's going to be difficulties. There's going to be problems. There's going to be hardships. There's going to be discouragement, depression. There's going to be seasons in which we are going to want to give into this lie that you're not going to make it, dude. Don't worry about it. Give up. It's okay. It's easier that way. It's not worth it. No. Trust me, I know. And the devil, he's not like here with the pitchfork. Nah, I'm going to get you. Like he's not like this crazy white dude with the red cape and, what eye should I pluck out of your skull? No, he's going to be what you want him to be. You need that new job? He's going to come in with a nice pressed suit. It's going to be hemmed a little short so you can see the cool socks. It's going to have the designer glasses on. You might even pull up in a brand new car. He's going to be that pretty girl. He's going to be that handsome dude. He's going to be that temporary comfort for you. He's not going to come and whack your head off right away. No, he's going to come to seduce you, and he's going to slide up into this table and try to begin planting lies inside of you. But then David, as he's thinking throughout the course of his life and all that God has brought him through, the highs and the lows, he says, you have prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And even though I may be surrounded, by enemies, those who are out to get me, those who are out to steal, kill, and destroy my life, he reminds himself of even in 2 Kings chapter 6, when Elisha is being hunted by the king of Syria, and the king of Syria sends his army to surround Elisha, and the servant who's trying to warn Elisha, like, you need to flee, you need to run, like, you're surrounded by these armies. And Elisha says to the servant and begins to pray, no, God, please open his eyes. And as the servant opens his eyes, he sees God's angel armies of chariots and fire surrounding the enemies. Like, this is why we've been singing this song, even though I'm surrounded by you. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And if that wasn't even enough, if it's not enough knowing that those who are for me are greater than those who are against me, I have the King of Kings, the King of creation, the King of salvation sitting at my table. And that there is infinite provision and infinite protection in the intimate presence of God, that he guides me by to green pastures, and he leads me beside still waters, that he is my replenishment, he is my refreshment, he restores my soul when I'm broken and beat up, that he leads me. But it's not only that God leads me, it's not only that God guides me, he's also got my back. So he says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me. So he's leading me along paths of righteousness, while his goodness, while his mercy is following me all the days of my life. And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The devil may be prowling around your table, but don't let him pull up a seat. Don't let him pull up a seat. And why does God do this? Like, why does he prepare the table before us in the presence of our enemies? Like, why do we have to be surrounded by bad things and discouragements and diagnosis and pressures and enemies? Why does he do this? Well, because when we're in the midst of all that, and we can say, nah, I'm good. I've got my God. I've got Jesus. Like, how much more glory does that give him? When things aren't going our way, when things are tough and difficult, and we can say, no. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in need. He's going to provide for me. He's going to protect me. See, this table here has been offered to us because of this table here. That the King of the universe gave up his heavenly blessings, his heavenly throne, came to this earth, lived a perfect life, a life that you and I could not live. He died a death that we should have died. He took on the punishment for our sin, our rebellion, so that as we place our faith and trust in him for salvation, we can have this intimate relationship with him. Please cling to the truth that there is infinite provision and infinite protection in the intimate presence of God. That he is for you, he is not against you. That as a child of God, as a son or a daughter of God who is in Christ Jesus, he is more than enough. He anoints my head with oil. He allows my cup to overflow. Hey, enemy, would you like something here? Oh, that's a blueberry muffin. That's a good one. Yeah. Hey, enemy, would you like a chocolate chip muffin there? Huh? No? Yeah. Here you go. Being attacked, being discouraged, instead of going to work tomorrow and putting up my guard here, have yourself an apple fritter. That's a good one right there. Yeah. Like my cup overflows. That the anointing oil with which he anoints us, it's this reflection of Jesus in us. Like this is what we just told our students, to be a light for Christ, to reflect Jesus in the situations in which you are. But let's remember the price that he paid for that reservation, for that table of two. It was his own life, his own body, broken for us, his blood that was shed for us so that we might have forgiveness.